So this is a snap update on Horizonte Minerals, one of the companies I've previously covered on my channel. There's two previous videos, the original video providing an overview of the company and the projects, and a subsequent video looking at the recent rise in nickel price and how that impacts the first flagship project, Araguaia, and how you can see that Horizonte, that project is very leveraged to the nickel price, and obviously nickel price has been in focus over the last couple of months. Probably there's two things that I wanted to just basically cover given the recent news from the company, and the first one is the news around Araguaia, and the company have announced a royalty agreement with Orion, who are a company in the sort of finance space that help fund mining projects, and they will get involved in all levels of funding. However, with Horizonte, the first dip in the water, if you like, is with a royalty agreement, and Horizonte have agreed to give them a 2.25% royalty for a 25 million upfront payment. It's $25 million upfront payment to Horizonte. And this is really good for the company because it gives them that cash cushion in what is otherwise a difficult equity market to drive forward with the continued work on completing the finance package. They've got a company called Endeavour Financial who are working on that for them, very well known and respected, and have raised billions for companies in the past. So that is progressing, and that was a good piece of news for the company. They don't need to go back and tap the equity markets. And just as a recap on Araguaia itself, if you go to the company website, you can see that they've got a price NPV calculator, and nickel today, as I speak, sitting around about $16,500 a ton. And you can see that price. There's a couple of options on the calculator to give you various economics depending on where the nickel price is and the stage of the operation. So with Araguaia, they're intending to start a 14,000 tonnes per annum operation, and at $16,500 a tonne, that provides a NPV of 704 million. You can see other figures there in terms of the free cash flow. It's a very healthy cash generator. It's got a very respectable 27.3% IRR. More important to note is the capex is 443 million, and that's what they're actually working at the moment to achieve. The royalty agreement with Orion is, if you like, the first step in that process, and probably gives the wider market and other participants. The company have said they're in discussions with several banks, some of which are in Brazil, other regions as well. And that capex figure is what they're working now to achieve to get to construction. This mine is actually fully permitted now. They've already got a construction license. They've gone through all the difficult and the legwork over the last couple of years, culminating in this point now where they were hoping to secure the finance. And I suspect we'll get some more information and news over the remainder of this year, potentially in terms of further offtake agreements, probably a bit more information about how some of the debt might work. So if you look at one of my other videos on Emerson, they were actually approached by a European bank with an offer of debt for, I think, around 150 million. It was an indicative offer. But this is the sort of thing we could also hear from Horizonte over the next couple of months as they move towards early next year, finalising the financing package for the 443 million. It's worth noting that Horizonte plan, after a couple of years, to ramp up the operation to a stage 2 operation, which will increase the annual tonnage. It doesn't affect the initial upfront capital because, of course, that will be paid, and they can service the expansion from cash flows over the first couple of years. So I think they're planning to ramp up after a couple of years. And then that moves the project economics at $16,500 a tonne nickel to 1.2 billion and a 31% IRR. And this is based at $16,500 a tonne nickel. We saw nickel recently pop up to as high as 18,500, and that makes the project worth nearly 1.6 billion. And the IR moves up to 36%. So these are incredible numbers, and it's obviously showing how leveraged this project is to nickel. Nickel can be quite volatile. Investors who look at that commodity will know that. However, most of the consensus is, and obviously if China and the US sort out various trade spats, that nickel is set to increase and really have a longer term nickel price of around anywhere between sort of $18,000 and $20,000 a ton. So, if you then start moving the curve up to 20,000, you're talking about something approaching, on just Araguaia, nearly 2 billion in MPV. So these are significant numbers, and these are the sort of projects that majors would be keen to have on their books, given the mine life and the quality of the projects and the jurisdiction, to keep servicing dividends. So given that there's been a lack of investment in nickel projects over the last 5 or 6 years, and if you listen to Jeremy Martin, he will say that if you've not got a project coming to market now, i.e. you're not in the development phase and ready to be in construction and be producing in the next year or two, then you're potentially going to miss the cycle. So this is what puts Horizonte in a very unique situation. Now, following this news, Horizonte announced the Vermelho PFS. And I've not had a chance to look in detail at this. I've been on holiday, so I really haven't sort of been able to delve much into it. But I always thought it was going to be very interesting. And my hope was that the project would be targeted towards the nickel sulfate, if you like, offtake, because that's obviously interests me in terms of EVs. EV batteries going forwards will require much higher levels of nickel in them than they currently have, and as such, any nickel sulfate projects are going to be in high demand in terms of the current view and the EV demand going forward. And so Vermelho, they completed test work, I think probably about 3-4 months ago, and confirmed that they could scale up the ore and product to nickel sulfate. And they've obviously built the PFS around this. And the PFS itself is worth noting, which was delivered on the 19th of October. It's worth noting that that is actually based on feasibility study numbers and inputs and data that were produced by Vale previously, when they'd actually, it's a number of years ago when they were going to take this project to construction themselves. And so, there's Horizonte have managed to leverage that data and inputs, and they've reworked an operation which is a higher grade, lower cost operation with lower tonnage, but suits the company and its size, and has reasonable capex demands given where capital markets are at the moment. And I'm pretty astounded actually, because one of the things that struck me most about the project, the PFS, was the C1 costs, and essentially they're saying that the cost of production is going to be around $8,000 a ton. Now, if you've listened to any commentators previously talking about nickel sulfate projects, the incentive price for nickel sulfate projects is going to probably require nickel to be around about $18,000 a ton, if not higher, just to incentivize mining companies to produce nickel sulfate as it's higher cost to produce, because they'll be using lower grade nickel. What puts Horizonte in a unique position here is that they've got high grade material, and they've modelled the PFS around this assumption. So they've got an amazingly low $8,000 a ton C1 cost, and overall the economics are a 38-year mine life, 1.7 billion MPV, and that's at a $16,500 a ton nickel price, which again is around the nickel price today. That results in 7.3 billion of free cash flow. So we're talking about massive numbers here, numbers that you would be expecting to see on majors books and projects. So these, for a company like Horizonte that's currently valued about 55 million market cap, it's quite it's quite incredible. And I've been an investor for a couple of years, and I've seen what the company have been doing, and I just honestly think that at some point, they're either going to drive this through and actually become a producer and be paying dividend, and Horizonte will be a household mining name, or they will get taken out, which I think is more likely given what we've seen in the previous cycles where nickel's been in an improving market, and the majors then come in and start cherry picking the projects. And with two tier one projects in close locality to each other, Horizonte are probably right at the top of the pecking order for any suitors that come along. So if we see an uplift in M&A, then any shareholders in Horizonte could conceivably see multiple returns on an investment today in terms of the price paid for the company, which could be, it could be going by previous deals such as the Oncopuma one. It could be $500 million. This is all conjecture on my part, but we're talking about multiples of over 10 times from where we are today, and that's probably conservative. So you can see there's another calculator on their website which they've done for the Vermelho project, and if we were to start moving up towards the long-term nickel price, incentive price of around about 18,500, Vermelho throws off over 2 billion MPV. Nearly hits a 30% IRR and 8.69 billion in free cash flow. They're planning, I think, to do a stage 2 operation on this one as well. We don't have it on this image at the moment on this slider, but they can essentially do what they've done with Araguaia and put a stage 2 operation in, increase tonnage, and further increase the cash flows. So we have two tier 1 projects here that really, Araguaia is targeted toward the robust stainless steel sector, which is what's driving nickel demand today. And then you've got Vermelho sitting there, nickel sulfate project. And these really are few and far between globally in terms of where Horizonte are sitting on the cash cost curve. And, this is something that if you look into it and run the numbers and look at it, and you can ignore today's market sentiment around junior mining stocks, which let's face it, it's not pretty at the moment. But if you can think forward further into the cycle, and you can see metals coming off lows, which I think is a given at some point, then this could be a quality investment for you.